You think you know about the Vietnam War. You think it was all about American firepower, the helicopters, the artillery, the sheer force of a modern army against farmers in black pajamas. That's the story they told you. That's the story I told myself for a time. It's a comforting lie. The truth is messier. The truth is about pride. My name is Douglas Raymond Ashford. I'm 97 years old now. Just a bag of bones waiting for the end. But back in November of '68, I was 41, a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, West Point, class of '49. I commanded the 1st Battalion, 8th Cavalry Regiment, the 1-8 Cav, and I was there. I was the one who looked at the truth and called it a lie. For 56 years, I've kept my mouth shut. There was a gag order, of course, for a while, but mostly it was the shame and the ghosts. You can't talk when the ghosts of 40 young men are standing behind you. All the senior officers, the ones who presided over my court-martial, my neat little career execution, they're all dead now. I've outlived them all. I've even outlived the cancer that's eating me from the inside out, for a few more months anyway. I never told my wife the whole story. She died thinking I was just unlucky. My children know I was disgraced. They don't know the why of it. This is the first time, the only time, I'm telling anyone what really happened, what I did. So, how does a 6-man patrol of Australian SAS, looking like they'd just crawled out of the earth, know more than the entire intelligence apparatus of the 1st Cavalry Division? How can a map, a bloody map hand-drawn on a filthy poncho, be more accurate than all the aerial photos and radio intercepts in the world? And what do you do? What does a man do when he realizes with absolute certainty that his own arrogance has just signed the death warrants for dozens of his own men who trusted him? You need to hear this. I'm going to tell you exactly how a decorated battalion commander, a man who thought he knew everything about war, led his men into a perfectly designed cemetery, a cemetery he was warned about, down to the last detail. It was November of '68. The big Tet push was over, or so they told us back in Washington. But on the ground, in Bin Zoom province, it didn't feel over. It felt angrier. The pressure from MacV, from Westmoreland's office, was immense. It was all about the numbers game, body counts. That was the only metric that mattered. Get the numbers up, show progress. And my battalion, the 1st of the 8th Cavalry, we were expected to produce. So we planned this thing, Operation Anvil Strike. The intelligence, all from aerial photos, showed a big Viet Cong supply depot. The plan was textbook, simple. We'd fly in with 340 of my boys, the hammer, and smash them against the jungle, the anvil. Simple. Except the anvil wasn't the jungle. It was the end of the monsoon season, 35 degrees Celsius, humidity so thick you could drink it, and mud, red clay mud that would swallow a man whole. That was the world we were about to step into. I remember flying into Lai Base Camp a couple of days before the operation was due to kick off. The back ramp of the Caribou drops, and the first thing that gets you isn't the wall of heat, it's the smell. Christ, the smell of a forward base. It's a smell you never forget. Half of it is burning human waste. They'd pour diesel into these 55-gallon drums and light it. That sweet, acrid stench mixed with generator fumes, the red dust that was in everything, and the smell of thousands of men sweating in the heat. It was the smell of a giant, angry machine trying to impose its will on a place that didn't want it. Then the heat hits you, like an open furnace door, and you hear the constant noise, the hum of generators, the whine of radios, the whoomp, whoomp, whoomp of Huey rotors. Me? I was 41. I felt nothing but pure, unshakable confidence. I'd seen worse in Korea. I knew the doctrine. We would go in, do the job, and come out. It was a mathematical equation. I was certain of it. You'd hear stories, rumors, in the officers' club at night over a warm beer. Stories about the Australians, the SAS, whispers about these 6-man patrols that would just disappear, vanish into the jungle for 20, 30 days at a time. No radio contact, no resupply, living like animals. I thought it was mostly bullshit, soldiers' tales. I remember my executive officer, Major Evans, a good man but a sycophant. He nodded over to a table of them one evening. They were quiet, didn't look like us. He leaned in and said to me, "Look at 'em, Colonel, a bunch of convicts with rifles." And I laughed with him. I actually said, "They can play hide and seek. We're here to fight a war." I saw them as unprofessional, a sideshow. War was about firepower and maneuver, the American way. What could a handful of muddy ghosts possibly teach the 1st Cavalry Division? It was arrogance, a deep, profound, and deadly arrogance. It was 1400 hours. The briefing was going perfectly. I was in my element, pointing at the acetate on the map, explaining the maneuver elements for Operation Anvil Strike. The air conditioning in the TOC hummed. My uniform was starched. And then the door at the back opened. And the smell hit us first. Christ, it wasn't just sweat, it was the jungle itself. Like rotting leaves and mud and something else, something feral. 6 men walked in, or things that had been men. They were thin as rails, caked in black and green paint, their uniforms practically dissolving on their bodies. They didn't walk, they glided, silent. Their eyes, God, their eyes were 100 years old. I remember thinking, clear as a bell, what in the hell are these goddamn hobos doing in my TOC? It was an invasion. They brought the war, the real, filthy war, into my clean, organized room. I paused the briefing. Every officer in the room was staring. I felt my authority being challenged just by their presence. So I walked over to the one with sergeant stripes, this Ken Morrison. I put on my most magnanimous voice, the kind you use for a child who's tracked mud in the house. I looked him up and down, making a show of it, and said, "Sergeant, you and your men look like you've been through hell. Why don't you get them to the mess for a hot meal?" And he just looked at me, not with defiance, almost with pity, a tired, deep pity. And he said, his voice a dry rasp, We appreciate it, Colonel, but we find the enemy doesn't smell you when you smell of the earth. The words just hung there. It wasn't insubordination. It was a lesson. A lesson I was too damn proud to hear. I just stared at him, completely confused. He didn't wait for me to respond. He moved past me to the main briefing map. My map. It was beautiful. A perfect grid, acetate overlays, red arrows showing our assault vectors. Professional. He unslung a filthy poncho liner from his pack and just laid it right on top. It was covered in hand-drawn markings, in charcoal, in what looked like blood. It wasn't a map, not like ours. It was a diary of a nightmare. There were no grid lines, just sketches of oddly shaped trees, notes about the sound of water, X's marking where he'd found things. I saw my XO, Major Evans, lean in and whisper to me, "Amateur hour, Colonel," and I nodded. But I couldn't take my eyes off it. There was a detail there, an intimacy with the ground that our aerial photos could never have. It made me uneasy. But that was just the map. The real chill came when he pointed a dirty finger at the center of my LZ and began to speak. He pointed at my map, right at the center of my beautifully marked landing zone, LZ Vulture. Just tapped it with a filthy finger. And he said, "Colonel, that's not a supply depot. It's bait, a reception committee, 2 NVA battalions, dug in and waiting." And then he explained why they smelled the way they did. It wasn't just filth. It was a science. He told me an alert enemy can smell American soap or insect repellent or our canned food rations from 200 meters away. 200 meters. So for weeks before a patrol, they ate what the locals ate. No tinned peaches, no coffee. They washed, if they washed at all, with some kind of odorless natural soap. They wanted to smell of nothing. Or no, wait, to smell of everything. The mud, the rot, the rain. To become part of the background noise of the jungle. When he explained it, I still thought it was extreme, over the top. But he had the numbers, the reports. SAS patrols detected by smell, 9%. Us, 73%. Christ. Then he talked about how they moved, and it was the complete opposite of everything I'd ever been taught. Everything West Point drilled into my skull. We moved in company strength, 120 men. We were loud. We were fast. We wanted to cover ground 10, 12 clicks a day. We had constant radio chatter. We were a hammer, right? Looking for a nail. Them? 6 men. Always 6. They moved. Maybe 2 clicks a day. Sometimes less. Total radio silence for the whole 19 days. He told me, "We don't go looking for Charlie, Colonel. We let him find us, but only on our terms." It wasn't about finding the enemy. It was about the enemy never, ever knowing they were there at all. For 19 days, his 6-man patrol had ghosted an entire NVA regiment. 19 days. They mapped every tunnel, every single machine gun nest. While we were flying over at 5,000 feet, taking pretty pictures of the treetops. And that's when it really started to get under my skin. The difference. It wasn't just about tactics. It was a whole different philosophy of war. Our way, the American way, was about force, imposition. We announced our presence. We wanted them to hear the helicopters coming. We wanted them to be scared. We believed in attrition, in technology, in overwhelming firepower. His philosophy? It was patience, invisibility, precision. And that's when he looked me right in the eye, this Sergeant Morrison, and he said, "You want the enemy to know you're here, Colonel. We want him to never even find out we were." And that shook me, because it made a terrible kind of sense. A few days later, I saw a report, a comparison of casualty exchange ratios, SAS, 1 to 500. 1 Australian lost for every 500 enemy. I read it 3 times. I thought it had to be a typo. 1 to 500. It was just a number on a page then. I hadn't seen what it meant yet, not in the flesh. That changed on November the 16th. It was the 16th of November, 36 hours after I'd dismissed him. 9:30 in the morning. The first wave of Hueys went in, dropping the first 170 men into LZ Vulture. I was circling above in the command chopper. The air was thick, like breathing hot soup. I could taste the dust and the diesel fumes even up there. On the ground, my boys were moving out, forming the perimeter. The helicopters lifted away, and the sound of them fading left this terrible quiet. It was too quiet. The jungle just swallowed the noise. All you could hear was the buzz of a billion insects and the clink of gear. I remember thinking, something's wrong. The sweat was running down my back, cold. And then I saw it on the ground. A single green flare arced up from the tree line, and the world ended. In the first 10 seconds, the entire wood line on 3 sides just erupted. A wall of noise and fire. AK-47s, RPDs, the thump whoosh of RPGs. It wasn't a firefight, it was an execution. I saw men, my men, just torn apart before they could even lift their rifles. The radio exploded into just screaming, pure animal screaming. I grabbed my own handset, shouting, "Get me Miller! Get me Captain Miller!" Nothing. Just static and screams. The NVA were jamming everything. I saw Miller's company on the northern edge just get erased. They were caught in a perfect interlocking field of fire, just like the drawing on that filthy poncho. After a minute, maybe 90 seconds, it was clear. We hadn't walked into a supply depot. We'd landed in the center of a perfectly designed killing machine, and I had sent them there. I was screaming at the pilot to get us lower. A damn fool thing to do. Useless. Down there, I could see the men trying to fight back, but they were pinned in that stinking red mud. I remember pressing my face against the plexiglass, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. The sweat was burning my eyes. I couldn't see straight. I thought, this is it. I've killed them all. This is how my life ends. I could hear the reports coming in. What little got through. Command elements hit. Platoon leaders down. Medics screaming for help. They were being systematically dismantled. And then, after maybe 25 minutes of pure hell, the firing from the west flank, it just changed. It faltered, became sporadic. For a second I thought they were regrouping for a final charge, but that wasn't it. Something else was happening. I never saw them arrive. Not a single one. One moment a machine gun nest was pouring fire into my men. The next, it was silent, just stopped. Through my binoculars I saw movement, but it wasn't our guys, and it wasn't Charlie. It was a flicker, a shadow, a ghost in the trees, and then another. It was them, the Australians. They weren't attacking it head on. They were flowing around it, through it, like water. No shouting, no tracers, just precise, economical violence. They took apart that NVA battalion from the inside out. They moved from tunnel entrance to bunker, silent, methodical. It wasn't a battle. It was surgery. And it took them maybe 10 minutes to break the back of an ambush that had just slaughtered 40 of the best men I'd ever known. When the medevac choppers finally got in, I was on the ground. I couldn't stand. I was just sitting in the mud, shaking. The smell, God, the smell of blood and cordite. It was everywhere. And then Sergeant Morrison was just standing there, looking down at me. He wasn't smug. He wasn't angry. He just had this profound sadness in his eyes. He knelt down and he pointed. "We found their commander's bunker, Colonel, right there, just where I marked it for you." He didn't have to say anything else. 40 men, 40 headstones I had carved with my own goddamn pride. 6 of his men did what 340 of mine couldn't. And in that moment, everything I was, everything West Point had taught me, it all just turned to ash and blew away in the Vietnamese wind. The flight back to Lai Khe, I don't remember it. I think there was no sound, just the vibration of the helicopter. I walked into the debriefing covered in mud and other things. A brigadier general, a man I'd admired, was there. He put a hand on my shoulder and said, "A tough break, Colonel, but you followed doctrine." I just looked at him. I couldn't feel my own face. And I said, "Sir, doctrine just murdered 40 of my men." He just stared back at me. His eyes went cold. He said, "Watch your tone, Ashford. Don't lose your nerve now." And that was it. The door was closed. In the next briefing, 2 days later, I didn't say a word. I just looked at their perfect maps, their neat red arrows, and I knew they were funeral plans. How do you explain it to them? How do you tell a room full of men who believe in a system that the system is a lie? You can't. You try to talk about the smell of the earth and they want to talk about firing solutions. You tell them their intelligence is a fantasy, and they look at you like you've gone mad. They thought I had battle fatigue. I didn't. I just had my eyes opened. I tried to change things in my own battalion, small things. I banned aftershave, scented soap. I made the men on patrol eat local rice instead of our rations. They hated me for it, thought I was losing my mind. But our contact rate on recon patrols dropped by over 60%. It worked. But I couldn't stop the big operations. I wrote reports, 17 of them. I detailed everything Morrison had said. I put the casualty exchange ratios in bold print. 1 to 500 for them, 1 to 12 for us. I sent them all the way up to MACV. They were classified top secret and buried. My career ended 3 months later. I refused a direct order to commit a company to an LZ that had the same feel as Vulture. I saved 80 men that day, and for that I was court-martialed, demoted, and sent home. For 56 years, the nightmare is always the same. Not the battle, the briefing room, the taste of the coffee, my own voice. Ignore those amateurs. 40 names. I say them every night. Adams, Baker, Costello. I owe them that. That's the weight I carry. Every day. For 56 years. Every single day. Why does it happen? That's the question, isn't it? Why do institutions, armies, entire nations look at the truth, plain and simple, and choose the comfortable lie? It's the pride. It's the sheer bloody cost of admitting that the doctrine you've invested millions in, the one you've built careers on, is fundamentally wrong. It's easier to bury your mistakes than to bury your pride. So you do. You bury them in flag-draped coffins. We had the evidence, the numbers. We knew. And it took another 20 years, another war, before the lessons from that stinking jungle started to sink in. You see it now, in how the special forces operate, the quiet patience, listening to the ground. But how many men died in those 20 years because admitting we were wrong in '68 was too high a price to pay? You have to ask yourself, where are you doing the same thing? Ignoring the evidence because admitting your mistake hurts too much. What's it going to cost you? Remember those 3 questions I asked you at the start? The first one, how did a 6-man patrol know more than the entire 1st Cavalry Division? Because they listened. They put their faces in the mud. They smelled of the earth. They didn't look down on the truth from 5,000 feet. They earned it, inch by painful inch. Second, how can a hand-drawn map on a poncho be more accurate than all our technology? Because our map was a fantasy, a theory from a clean room. His map was a diary of a nightmare, a scar, written in what was real. And the third question, what does a man do when he knows his arrogance has murdered his own men? He does nothing. He can't. He just lives with it. He carries the names, 40 names, for 56 years, and he tells the story just once. 1 to 500, that was their number. 1 to 12 was ours. 56 years on, that's the maths that still wakes me up in the dark, every single night.